This is Healthcare Now, radio's trending now. Get ready for an exhilarating 30-minute ride through the latest topics driving change in digital health across the news and social media. Join us as our subject matter host takes the lead in uncovering what's hot and what's not. So buckle up and tune in to stay in the know. Hello and welcome to Trending Now on Healthcare Now Radio. I'm your guest host, Greg Masters, sitting in today. And what's trending now is the Health 2023 event that's recently wrapped in Las Vegas, Nevada. I was fortunate to be there, and so were my two guests, who are hosts on the Healthcare Now Radio Network. Dr. Nick Vanderheyden, aka Dr. Nick, is the incrementalist and host of the radio show News You Can Use, and Dr. Joshua Liu is the host of The Digital Patient. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Greg, thanks for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here.
Likewise, Nick, Greg, excited to do this with you both.
So trending now is obviously Health 2023. This is an event that hails itself as the ecosystem event for the entire healthcare industry. Here's some stats. It's the 6th annual event that was just held in Las Vegas. The first event was held in 2018. There were 3,500 attendees. This year, that topped over 11,000. This included over 900 sponsoring exhibitors and 350 speakers. So let's start first with overall impressions. Dr. Nick, why don't you share your key takeaways from Health?
Well, I think it was clear that everybody was calling this the year of AI. I bristled a little bit with that concept because I think AI has been around for a lot longer than just this year. And calling this the year of AI seemed a little bit inappropriate, given that we've been working towards this point and continue to do so. Was it exciting? Has been lots of innovation and certainly improvements in terms of what the technology can offer. Absolutely. But would I call it the year of AI? I'm not so sure. And I really sort of looked at this from a workforce standpoint. And that was really where I found the most insights and impact. There was really an awful lot of commentary from a wide range of individuals talking about the enormous challenge that we face in healthcare with lack of resources. We're struggling to deliver enough resources into the system to satisfy healthcare of many, many people that continue to be underserved by a healthcare system, or at least unequally served, let's say. And the challenge with that is that you can't throw resources at this, not least of all when we look at the senior levels and the highly trained individuals in the system. It takes many, many years to get a cardiologist or to get an orthopedic surgeon or a physician or a nurse specially trained in intensive care. So you can't just say, right, we need some more resources. We could, of course, go and steal them from other places, which, you know, has been one of the ways that we've approached this, is to attract talent from other countries. But that's really not the answer. And in that sense, it was all about finding solutions that tried to allow the people already in the system to actually spend more time in care. And that certainly was where AI, I think, delivered more value or started to really bring new opportunities to allow the clinicians in the healthcare system to do more clinical care. Beyond that, I'm just going to make one mention right at the beginning, because for me, it really sort of stood out. And I think it was more about attracting interest. And that was General Catalyst's announcement about buying a healthcare system. You know, this whole concept of, I think they called it HATCO. I'm not sure what that stands for. But, you know, this for me was just extraordinary. We've seen so many folks trying to step into the healthcare and say, gosh, you know, we do this kind of work in business, in finance, whatever system they're in. I know we can do this better. And they step in and they say, we're going to improve healthcare because we know what we're doing. General Catalyst, this wasn't the first time that they've announced something at Health. In fact, they did so, I think, a year or so ago. It really lacked a lot of detail. All it did was focused a lot of attention. And, you know, that included me, to be fair. I sort of commented on it, as lots of people did. I'm not sure it's really highly relevant, but it created a lot of buzz and a lot of interest, because suddenly you've got this financial organization saying, we're going to go and buy a system and then make it right, which was an interesting approach, but I'm not so hopeful about it. Josh, what about you?
Yeah, so maybe to springboard off of what Dr. Nick said. So I agree. I don't think this really was the year of AI. To your point, AI is not new to healthcare. I think people forget, for example, that ECGs for the past 30 years have had an AI element where it basically produces an initial diagnosis that you can choose to accept or reject. But using AI is not new in healthcare. I think what it was maybe the year of, let's call it generative AI, or at least the year of consumer facing AI where individual people feel like they can actually interact with AI, and certainly ChatGPT and generative brought that to the forefront. I think a very common thing I heard from at least the provider folks was, don't call it artificial intelligence. We like to call it augmented intelligence. I think there was that big theme of we don't want to replace clinicians. We want to augment their capabilities so they can deliver more care at scale. As Dr. Dick mentioned, the workforce shortage is a huge thing right now. So I think that was a big theme from an AI front. I agree. I think the General Catalyst announcement was pretty interesting. Actually, yesterday, Mark Harrison, who's former Mountain CEO, now is the CEO of this new HATCO company. He did an interview on Becker's, and he kind of actually laid out a bit more of their plan, which was kind of really interesting. So he said, hey, we're planning to spend between $1 to $3 billion on a health system. So maybe something in like a 5-hospital system kind of range we're looking at. But I think my big guess is that there might be big ambitions to, re-engineer how a health system should be from the ground up as a reference point. But I suspect at the very least, it's going to be a test bed for their portfolio companies to basically get them their first reference customer to, everyone complains about sales cycles in healthcare and health systems. If they can get companies getting deployments quickly in their own system and their own living lab and then export that and commercialize it to other health systems, I feel like that's like the floor of what they could do. If they can actually transform healthcare beyond that, that would be amazing. But I think at the very least, it's going to be a big win for their portfolio companies is what I'd guess.
Love it. Love it. I think we're in violent agreement in all of that. So well said, Josh.
Yeah, I would add, guys, that I also felt that the HATCO announcement, which is the health assurance transformation company fostered by General Catalyst, which well known in the space, but they recruited Stephen Klasko from Jefferson, and the CEO of HATCO is former CEO of Intermountain Health. So they're stitching together some really high-powered people with real deep experience in the transformation theater. Klasko, if you're not following what Jefferson has pioneered, they really went in deep into the hub and spoke academic medical center and surrounding community hospitals integration, and then the remote patient monitoring and telehealth. They really leveraged that quite a bit. So he learned a lot. By the way, when Klasko was on stage at one of the award ceremony after that announcement, which I found is the most profound event at Health this year, was HATCO. I went up to Klasko and I said, hey, I hadn't heard that the dollar scale range that you quoted, Josh. But I went up to him and I said, so that health system you're acquiring wouldn't happen to be Jefferson, would it? He looked at me, he goes, no. I'm just curious.
So can I push back a little
Please.
bit, Greg? Because that's what I do, but I feel a bit of deja vu with Haven. I mean, didn't we hear all this? And if you were going to cite somebody that I huge amount of respect for Atul Gawande, and they put him in, and I go, wow, inspired. And then in hindsight, no disrespect to him, I just don't think he was set up to be successful. We didn't get anything. I mean, literally nothing. I mean, maybe they did with some private set. So I'm a little bit more reserved about any positive outcome. I don't want to beat up on people, but everybody that's in healthcare that I've ever talked to that actually lives and breathes this, clinicians on the coalface, all say, yeah, it's a bit more complicated than that. I mean, that's my experience.
Yeah, as I recall the announcement, he said 14 member-friendly, typically nonprofit 501c3 health systems as members in the entity. And then the target acquisition, most likely a 501c3 health system. They're going to, at least in contrast to Haven, and actually even before that, I don't know if you guys remember Partners Health Plan joint venture with Aetna, which was part of Voluntary Hospitals Association, a big epically failed, never really reached the presence in the marketplace. But if they're going to create a living laboratory that is a health system that's under their zeitgeist of innovation, wow, that'll be really different. But I'm with you. Atul was not an operator. Haven, once JP Morgan got cold feet, oh my God, this puts us at odds with our client base. We're out of here, So yeah, it's an interesting.
Healthcare, if nothing, it's always interesting. That's always my.
I think a neat thing though is that I'm curious, like, because they're gonna have to build a culture at this purchase system that's a little bit more nimble, more innovative. I wonder if they're gonna be able to recruit a certain like archetype of clinician who wants to move fast, wants to break things, wants to try new things. They actually may be able to build a pretty forward-thinking culture who's excited to partner with a big VC firm. I think they can also lose a lot of staff who come with the system who just don't feel comfortable with this. So I'll be curious to see how they navigate the people culture aspect of that purchase. It's going to be pretty different.
Yeah, and I mean, there's certainly groups of people within every system that want to move fast, but then there's lots of naysayers and the folks that know this is the way that we've done it. And, mixing it, even if you bought it with that intent and that's what you're driving towards, you've still got to change what's there. It's, it comes with all this baggage that is just extraordinarily hard to sort of change. And, there are days when I think about it sort of quite despondently. I mean, I'm always hopeful most of the time, but it's hard. I mean, it's Sisyphus and his stone going up the hill, right?
For those of us who've been at this a while, I identify.
Right.
Yeah. So Jeff, let me come back to you. Thanks for the clarification on AI. That was really well stated and well framed. And maybe you might contrast what the generative piece is in terms of what historically has been sort of AI, legacy AI, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, I don't know if I would call it legacy AI. I just think that I think probably most of the AI that's existed in healthcare has probably been more of the, let's call it either predictive nature. So a lot of it's been around predictive analytics. So we have a lot of data collected in healthcare, and people have built models around predicting risk of readmission and mortality and all kinds of things. So I think that's been a big piece. The other that's been a bit more recent has been around, machine learning and aspects of, of computer vision when it comes to like medical imaging and be able to try and identify pathologies in images. So, I mean, that's started to grow the last couple of years. But I think with generative, we think about, large language models, and specifically around how do we actually create new information or query information, produce new content. So, I mean, the really hot one that we've seen in health has been around ambient clinical intelligence or ambient voice text. So for folks who aren't familiar, historically, the way clinicians would create medical notes is to actually dictate them or write them out. Well, with ambient clinical intelligence, you just it just listens to you talk through an application, and then it automatically summarizes that into a note for you. You review it and, make a few changes and then just sign off on it. Microsoft and Nuance made a huge announcement at Health about some brand new, I think Copilot, they called it, which basically is that full service. We'll listen to it automatically with AI and then spit out a note for you. The thing I was really disappointed by, to be honest, was we had the two main leaders in the room. We had, the head of, Nuance Ambient there on stage, but Ian Shaquille, who, I'll admit, like I know him personally, and he's the founder of Augmetics, the other major leader in ambient clinical intelligence. He was there at Health, and I'm just like, how could they not get these two people on stage debating on a round table, the two leaders in ambient clinical intelligence, like they're in the same room? How is that not a session? That kind of blew my mind. We had all the DNA in the room for that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that whole space I think is super interesting, super exciting. I think one of the things that I noted, I commented on after the fact. I mean, I had the pleasure of going and seeing Nabla, which is a company out of France, and I had a demo, and I spent my life in this space and have watched this. I think it's been interesting. There's been developments, but it's been a lot slower than I expected. Here was the thing that really came out, because there was a big animated discussion on one of the boards that I spend time on. And I'd sort of highlighted, well, it's, there's more to it than Nuance and Augmetics and, some of the names that most people. Somebody actually produced a list of 2, 4, 6, about 15 or 16 other companies that are doing this. And that to me is really exciting, because that's what I think we need in this space, which is lots of competition of folks that are starting to use that generative technology to create that note. And the demo I had, and I think this was, across that large span of customers, having a discussion with your physician. And we did. It was in the hall, it was on the phone, and 20 seconds later, it produced a note. And I wasn't making it easy. I wasn't being ridiculous about it, but I certainly didn't make it easy. It was actually 2 physicians interviewing me and, asking me questions. And the note that came out just blew my mind. And I think that's pretty impressive, because I've been in this space for a long time. I'm very excited about that specific technology, not from a single, provider, but from all of those providers now really pushing the envelope to say, can we now start to produce notes without having to do all that, stuff in the background? Very exciting.
So, guys, let's pause for a moment. If you're just tuning in, I'm Greg Masters, and you're listening to Trending Now on Healthcare Now Radio. I'm talking with Dr. Nick Vanterheyden and Dr. Joshua Liu as we reflect on the just wrapped up health event in Las Vegas. So, Nick, let me come back to you. You've authored on incrementalhealthcare.com some of your thoughts and takeaways from health. What else you got?
Yeah, so a few other things that sort of stood out. One was the big loss of people. I talked about this, but, it really struck me. One of the data points I heard was 200,000 nurses lost during the pandemic. You can't switch that back on. I mean, we've got to find resources to replace that. And it came with an additional data point that I wasn't aware of. Josh, I'm curious to know if you were familiar with this, but 60% of cardiologists and pretty much most other specialties, the individuals in that are over 55. Well, whoa, we're now, we're going to have a real problem filling the back end of that to have enough resources to be able to do some of these things. And, technology can help, but we've really got to sort of solve this problem of getting resources in. Couple of other things that stood out to me, it was, the nuclear arms race that I feel, we're in between the various organizations, the ones that want to pay for healthcare and the ones that are delivering the healthcare, or, essentially the payers and, the providers of it, and patients are sort of stuck in the middle. But, they continue to find ways of not paying, finding ways to pay, some of this revenue cycle management approach, we're trying to remove administrative, in many instances, it's economic. And, it's just a constant battle with this technology and who's got the better resources. That's, a little bit depressing, because we really need to focus on other things. And then the other thing that I saw was, drugs. I mean, my Lord, the whole agonist for obesity that we're seeing, this new class of drugs, and, the fear that that's going to rip away whole sectors of our economy, from chips and soda companies disappearing, which, I'm not seeing that necessarily. But, yes, we can see some value, but they're really expensive. Can we afford them? So there's this constant flowing change to the way that we deliver healthcare. But this seemed like an inflection point in terms of some of the understanding. It really was quite the revolution and came quite quickly, a bit like the GPT that we saw sort of launch on us. And maybe that was my one big takeaway was, if you thought things were moving fast before, holy smokes, we're somebody just turned on the gas and poured more gasoline into the fire. I mean, it's just so many things were happening, and I had a really hard time keeping up. I mean, I was overwhelmed initially, but as I said in my post, I ultimately sort of looked at this as a process of going around and finding, I was looking for opportunities to engage with people. And, some of it was random, but it was well worthwhile.
And we usually cross paths. I didn't even see you.
No,
yeah,
not once.
yeah.
And I made that point, you know, there were lots of people
Yeah.
I know that were there and never saw them.
Right. So, okay, Josh, let's go back to you. Anything else that kind of key takeaway?
Yeah. Well, I think an amazing thing is if we think back to a year ago, and if you had asked us in 2022 to predict what would be the main themes and trends of health 2023, I mean, I would not have guessed GLP-1s. I would not have guessed generative AI. Maybe not even like the rise of retail going really big on virtual care. Like I probably would have guessed something far different. So I think to your point, Dr. Nick, the speed at which things are changing, like I don't even want to try and predict what health 2024 is going to be all about. I think one stat that came to mind during that got me shocked was there was a session where Dr. Nisha Mehta talked about how 75% of physicians now would not recommend medicine to their kids as a career. So like I am so worried about the future of the workforce. I mean, population growth is on decline. We got the silver tsunami growing. People are leaving healthcare. And I don't think we can just hope that AI is going to solve everything with the workforce shortage. We need people excited about healthcare again. We gotta make it better. We gotta have better working conditions so people want to actually keep making that difference and not get cynical so quickly once they get into healthcare. So I'm really worried about that. And I hope that's a big theme kind of going forward. We got to fix that.
Yeah, I've got to add to that. I mean, that's very personal to me, Josh, because my daughter is PGY2, and she entered in, she's been bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, wanted to do this since as long as we could remember as a family. And, that first year, all she wanted to do was quit. All she wanted to do was quit. That is a terrible, terrible tragedy. And she's N1, but we see it across the board. We have to fix this. Technology is not going to do this. We've got to give a damn about the people actually delivering care.
Yeah, no, she's not alone. There's no question about that. And that drain from the nursing pool, that's on top of a strained nursing pool. I mean, how many per diem registry staff in hospitals today? Somewhere between, on the low end, 10% to the high end, 60, 70% come from agencies and registries. So a lot of instability in the labor pool, so to speak.
What do y'all think about the big announcements from retail? So I know so Walmart made that big announcement that they're rolling out primary virtual care to all their employees and families. I think the other big one was Walgreens. Tracy Brown kind of came out and said, you know what? Before there were 3 networks in healthcare: hospitals, doctors, urgent care centers. Now there's a 4th network. They're calling it community-driven healthcare, which is basically go to your local Walgreens and get healthcare. Where do you think that might go in the next couple of years?
I've got to say I've always watched Walmart and thought, very much along the line of the pharmacies. When you look at the demographics, you find that 98% of the population lives within 10 to 15 minutes drive of a pharmacy or a Walmart. And if you're going to deliver local care, which you need to, you can't just do telehealth. Let's be clear. Fantastic solution in certain cases, but you still have to have that one-to-one. I'm a big fan of them because I think they're in the right places. They've got the bricks and mortar, the infrastructure. They've failure to launch a little bit in many instances, and they've had some interesting people running them and then have left. That doesn't mean to say they're out. To be clear, I'm not negative on General Catalyst. I'm just, a bit circumspect about, hey, we're going to buy it and fix it. These folks are similar in that sense, but I'm rooting for them a little bit more because I think they've got the right infrastructure to be able to deliver if they can add in all those other services. So for me, that's the 2024 prediction that I shouldn't make, and nobody's ever going to call me on if I get it wrong. But if I get it right, I'm going to come back to this recording and say, that's going to be 2024 health, right?
Well, I'll tell you, the thing I heard from providers at health was, we can't ignore retail's entrance into healthcare. To ignore it would just be foolish. I even heard one CIO say on a panel, if we as providers, as health systems, can't satisfy all the primary care needs, all the urgent care needs of the country, and Walmart and Walgreens, CVS can actually get a clinic in every single store so that patients can get brick and mortar care, maybe we should accept that's part of the solution that we have to have in the country. And so I think we're seeing that open-mindedness start to come up with providers that, hey, you know what, maybe they can be part of the solution. And we don't like competing with it, but if we're thinking big picture, maybe it's necessary.
And sorry, Greg, I know you try. I just want to say the one key thing, if you're going to make that successful, make it integrated in data and actual care, so that it's not just this outside whatever, so that, if I get it there, it still flows in and it comes into my data point. Sorry, Greg.
So I just want to say really quickly, I think we're deja vu 2 here on round 2 with the retail integration plus tech and all those names that we're familiar with. It remains to be seen. I think I'm a little less optimistic about it. I think physicians have to take back control of the delivery system up to and including the financing piece. When they do that,
yay for physicians.
Yeah, I think we're in be in a better spot. So we are getting towards the end here. Any final thoughts, guys?
Let me kick off and say, I got to say, I love the whole change. I think that's important. We've got to keep, constantly innovating, coming up with new things. I do get a little bit concerned about the glitziness of all of this. And, I respect health for what they do. They do this deliberately to try and, make people do things unusually so that you mix and match in ways that don't typically take place in, the storied conferences. So that's a good thing. But we need to keep an eye on the dollars and spend the money appropriately on the care of the people that actually need the care. I continue to be hopeful. Everybody knows my glass is always full. It's half full of whiskey and half full of air. So, I look forward to the next one. And unlike Josh, I'm going to say year of the retail.
I love it. I think for me, Health 2024, my hope actually is that there is not a bunch of new themes and announcements. I actually hope 2024 is, we talked about all these things in 2023, these new things like generative AI, and here are now these success stories that we're showcasing in 2024 because it worked. It's not, we're going to jump to 3 new themes because nothing worked that we tried. Let's see success.
Well, there you have it. That'll be the last word on today's broadcast. I want to thank Nick and Josh for joining me today.
Thanks for having us, Greg.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
Learn more about news you can use and the digital patient, along with the show Pop Health Week, on their program pages at healthcarenowradio.com, and learn more about Trending Now on its program page on healthcarenowradio.com as well. And make sure you follow the show's social hashtag, #TrendingNowHC. I'm Greg Masters, and until next time, if it's happening in healthcare, and it's now, it's on Trending Now.